like these summits is because it really tackles green stuff from a very pragmatic perspective. That's cost, economics. Because, you know, there are a lot of other green places that talk about green from a sustainability. This weekend, the Living Green Expo in St. Pete, you know, from the environmental perspective, but really from the business perspective, there's a lot of economic advantages to going green. One of the areas that I did a lot of research on, wrote a book on, and that I'm actually employed with is green business, the green industry. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, what is a green job? You ask 10 different people in 10 different green industries and they'll give you 10 different answers. But I think a good overall concept is any either traditional job or new job that encompasses sustainability, environmental stewardship into the fold. And I cast a wide net, and I think, you know, when you look at green, you can go anywhere from traditional stuff like public works projects, and I'll explain what I mean by that, to, you know, real niche stuff like green interior design. So it's really a kind of a broad brush concept, a green collar or green job. One of the things I think people are kind of catching on is that it's becoming more than a fad. I think if you were to ask anyone a couple of years ago, they'd say, oh, you know, green jobs are going to be the next fad. They're going to come and then they're going to disappear. I think things have proven that that's not the case at all. In fact, there's been even more of a groundswell of support from it. And you know, you always kind of have to look at things through a couple different perspectives in terms of, you know, how big are green jobs going to get. My dad loves to ask me this all the time. He's like, well, where are all the green jobs Obama provided? There's going to be millions of them, aren't there? And I'm like, well, no. And that's part of the problem, is it's really hard to quantify how many there are going to be. So when you get up there, anyone, any kind of politician goes up there and say, hey, you know, this plan is going to create 2 million green jobs in the next 5 years. Well, it could create 1.5 million, but they'll still say, oh, it was a failure, you didn't create 2 million. But I think if you look at a lot of these industries, and even through the recession, they've held their own and they're growing. An example, currently there are 93,000 people involved in the solar industry in Florida. At the end of 2010, the Solar Institute did a survey of all the privately owned solar companies in the United States. Over 50% were looking to hire, 48% were keeping their workforce as is, and only 2% were looking to lay off or reduce their workforce. The geothermal industry expects to add anywhere from 2,500 to 5,000 jobs in 2011. Wind power, wind energy is becoming another huge aspect of the renewable energy portion of green jobs. Ecotourism is expected to increase in not only revenue but employment worldwide over 50% over the next 5 years. So these are numbers from trade groups and people in the organizations looking at, you know, how big this is getting. And then there are a lot of areas that are tenuous that you don't know about. And a perfect example is the huge growth in corporate sustainability positions. Almost every corporation now has a chief sustainability officer or someone involved locally in that corporation to advance green initiatives within the corporation that don't go outside. And I've met people that work for everything from, you know, smaller 10 to 100 person firms all the way up to multinational corporations. And you guys had some speakers last year at the Tampa Green Business Summit that are involved in that. There's a real palpable energy when you talk to people in this industry of growth, and not only of growth but of investment. And investment not only from government but investment from the private sector. Earlier this week, a new website just went online called ongreen.com, and it's one of the first online marketplaces for people in clean technologies to meet up with investors in clean technologies. And this is becoming a real big way for a lot of upstart companies to kind of bypass some of the slowdown in government spending that would usually go towards incubating some of these green businesses. So, you know, you have favorable government policies, you have a definite reduction in government spending, but you still have government initiatives. Now you have private investors looking to invest in upstart companies. And, you know, those three things together are creating a growing field of jobs. And another area where you can see that is you look at the explosion of degree programs at major universities in sustainability, in green training. You know, what Osceola County is doing. I mean, a couple of years ago, that kind of thing was unheard of. It just didn't exist. Now, of course, because this is a really kind of a new field, although a stormwater engineer I work with always chastens me. It's like, I've been doing green stuff for 20 years. So that's, you know, we've been improving water quality and doing low impact development before it was fashionable. So and I did put his quote in my book because I think that's important. I think there are a lot of industries that have been doing this for a while, and it's just finally starting to catch up with the public perception at large. But you know, there are going to be some shakeouts. Not every solar company is going to make it. Not every alternative energy biofuel is going to make it. We may not ever get energy from algae, although I do think that will become economically feasible. But stuff is going in the right direction. U.S. Energy Secretary Chu predicted that within the next decade, solar power will be in even or less than cost with fossil fuels. Last year, the cost per kilowatt hour for solar dropped 11%. So I think with the increase in gas prices, with just the uncertainty with fossil fuel prices, that you're going to see some of these alternative energies become a lot more competitive. And you know, a case could be made that something like natural gas could be, you know, is a much cleaner alternative than, say, coal. So, you know, I think there's going to be a shakeout of how a lot of these different technologies, where we're going to end up in 10 years. So you might not see some of the green jobs that are around now, but I think this is a field that's just going to be growing by leaps and bounds. Now, part of the problem is green jobs not necessarily going to be spread across the country evenly. You're probably not going to do well to find a geothermal job in Florida. You probably want to go to Utah or Nevada or California. Consequently, Seattle might not be a hot spot for solar energy. Although interesting to note, the state of New Jersey is now second to California in number of solar panel installations in its solar industry. Is the second largest in the United States. So even some places where it's cloudy and gray and overcast, you'll have some of these industries. I touched on some unique green careers too that are coming up. And Tim and I were talking earlier about environmental law. Environmental law and green law has been around for a while, but it's becoming even more of an issue now because of more regulations, because of you know, new and emerging technologies. There needs to be, you know, a legal avenue and legal representation for a lot of these companies. So environmental law programs are seeing huge increases in enrollment. General environmental science programs are seeing huge increases in enrollment. And I even make the argument that traditional hard science jobs, biotechnology, nanotechnology, things that are incorporated into green technology, you know, they're all interconnected, and you're seeing a huge growth in these industries and a growth in people wanting to get into them. Another area that I think is really important to facilitate the movement in the direction of a more sustainable economy with sustainable and green jobs is training. And much like what Osceola is doing, you have, I think it's fair to say that when things finally get back on track and we look back at this recession, there are going to be jobs that are lost that are never going to come back. And I don't think people are really ready for that yet. They're not prepared. And I think people need to get ahead of the curve and find training and find skills that are going to be the next ones in demand. There was a really good article in the New York Times maybe about 3 or 4 months ago about some green technology companies and upstart companies that are having a hard time finding workers. Now, there are a lot of people unemployed, but they're having a very hard time matching the skill set. and they're having to invest even more in on-the-job training. So, you know, another thing that you've seen a real surge in are specific training and certification programs. You know, everything from people repairing turbines on wind machines out west in Indiana and in the Great Plains areas, to people in the solar industry here in Florida. So training is going to be a big cornerstone, because you can have every university in the world offering a 4-year degree, but if you're 45 years old and you want to change your career midway, you have a family and kids, you don't have time to do that, you need these certification and these training programs, and I think that's going to be a real big push. And I think that's one of the things that's going to drive a lot of people that are out of work now and might not get those kind of jobs back. And you know, I'm thinking the construction industry, I don't really ever see it in Florida getting back to what it was. I think that's, you know, not realistic to ever have that happen again. Although, you know, we never learn from our mistakes, and it happened in the 20s and happened, I'm really excited to be part of organizations like this and talking to people that are actually in green jobs, that are in green business, that are making the changes on the ground. And I think because we're really at the beginning, although this has been going on for a few years, we're really at the beginning of a new trend in the way that jobs are done. You know, everything from telecommuting, you know, is real big now, to the way that they're perceived by people. And I think, although there is some political backlash to green jobs, which I don't understand how you can be a backlash to any job, you know, I think more and more people, regardless of political affiliations, are caring more about the environment, or seeing the value that a healthy environment and a sustainable economy is equal to a growing economy. And I think companies see that in their bottom line, saving money on energy, saving money on costs. And I think people are seeing that these are real, legitimate, long-term career paths to take. Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I was wondering your thoughts. In Florida, you mentioned 93,000, right? Solar companies, right?
That's nationwide. 93,000.
Nationwide.
Yeah.
Florida's one of the last obviously in solar, a lot of times because of what we're dealing with the utilities here.
Yeah.
And we're actually brokering with USF a couple deals right now, independently, and we found the only reason we were able to do that is because we're working with a distributor that sells this, has the huge buy rate. They can make 9 cents a kilowatt work for solar financing here, and you know, obviously the state's broke when it comes to incentives as well. What do you feel with what's going on now with the governor legislation? I mean, putting that into the whole scheme of what's going on here. We do have a lot of solar companies here, but we've had them in our bigger summits. And what's going to happen? How do you?
One thing that was in the newspaper this morning is that bill that's going through the legislature now, allowing utilities to raise their rates to pay for solar. And a lot of these smaller solar companies feel like the legislature has given a monopoly to the larger utilities to go into solar. And, you know, that's a double-edged sword. On one hand, yeah, hey, it's great that we're going to finally, the most sunny state in the United States is going to be doing solar on a large scale. You know, but at the same time, you know, are you Walmarting the process of solar energy here in Florida? Hopefully, like most things, it'll shake out in the middle.